So hello, my name is Mark, and we had a very deep look into very small things at this point before. And what I'm trying to give you now is an overview as to, with a little distance, how much technology matters to society in general on a very broad range. And I'll do this in context with arts as the cultural background of our society. And so a little bit on my background. Yeah, a little bit of my background. I'm a software developer. I've developed for the largest part of my life algorithms and technologies for the visual industry primarily, and then I founded a company called Scoreloop, which became the biggest mobile social gaming network, and sold that to BlackBerry, and then I was in venture capital. So my focus very much was in technology, and now I'm doing arts, and I'll tell you a little bit on how that evolved and why that makes a lot of sense to combine that. So what we essentially did at Scoreloop was we provided an SDK that is a software development kit for game developers so that they could make their games more efficient, better, more creative. So we provided technological tools to game developers that they would integrate and make their games better. And that sounds pretty much something that is very much related to software and the technological world. However, this fundamental approach to develop tools is something that has been the driver of our society forever, actually. And I'm showing you a stone here to represent the Stone Age, because from the very beginning of our cultural development, the development of tools has driven what we are. And that's something we often forget when we talk about technology, because that sometimes sounds a little nerdy and some sort of an ingredient, but it is not. We have developed, as mankind, tools and technology from the very beginning, be that a stone to crack food, be that fire to boil and cook food, be that a stone to turn it into a weapon, that as well. So there was always those two sides. But it has driven how we are and how we interact with each other forever. So technology is not something of our current age. It is something that has driven our development forever. There was, in fact, a period in time where there was a different notion on this thing. And I'm showing you here an image out of a book to represent the Middle Age. And in the Middle Age, there was a different notion. It was not about we create technology and we believe in our own power and recognition of the world and improve it, but we rather believe in priests and the church and what they tell us. And there's a lot to it, obviously. But if it's the only thing you believe in, kind of you hand it off to someone else to tell you what to do, to tell you what to think and how to evolve and how to behave, you leave it up to someone else, and there's a certain risk in that. There might be a period of good living, but there is a certain risk in doing this, and we saw what happened kind of at the end of the Middle Age, and that was this. Does anyone recognize what this is? That's the Black Plague. And the problem with the plague is that it obviously came from that little flea that infected a lot of people, and it infected pretty much everyone, no matter if they believed in the church or not. They infected everyone. And why was it possible for this flea to survive and to kind of strive, so to say? Because it hit an unprepared society. So society already was a lot further ahead when it comes to hygienic situations back in the old Rome, when there was the aqueducts and water was a lot cleaner. But there was no such thing as to think about how to evolve and how to develop society to resist towards these type of dangers and threats. And so a lot of people were killed, unfortunately, and that kind of sparked, I mean, that's a little simplified, but that sparked the Renaissance. And the Renaissance in the sense that it was about rediscovering existing knowledge. It was about recognizing the world with your own senses and to think about how to make life better and how to improve society. And that not only happened in arts, obviously it sparked science, like in medicine and physicists, but also especially in arts. And if you look at this painting, I mean, that's a 14th century painting by Jan van Eyck. And by the way, if you ever see a painting where the guy looks like Putin, it's very likely that it's a Van Eyck. So the center of this painting, of the motif here, is the married couple, the couple that is about to marry, the Arnolfini couple. But the actual center is this parabolic lens here. So Van Eyck was very proud to brag about the fact that he knew a lot about optics, because that was almost the same type of profession, being an artist or being a physicist. So he used optics in the 14th century to project parts of the image onto the canvas and then paint it. And there's a very interesting book that I can only recommend by, it's called Secret Knowledge by David Hockney, also a very famous artist. And he took a number of those pictures and analyzed them. Like if you look at the chandelier, and this is only a portion of the painting, but if you look at the chandelier and then the floor, if you see the whole painting, then the problem is that it's completely different perspectives. And why is that the case? Because there just wasn't that good a light source back in the day, so they had to do partial projections. But when you talk about the old masters, it was all about technology, how they mixed the color, how they projected. So there was a lot about technology, and they were proud of it. Now, it is also not only about technology, it's also about this entrepreneurial spirit, and that's part of the title for this conversation here. That's a painting by Lucas Cranach, and it depicts Martin Luther. And it is interesting because Cranach, which is one of the big painters you see when you go to the Louvre or the Alte Pinakothek here, but he was primarily an entrepreneur at heart. So what he did is he set up shop, he created a manufacturer where paintings were mass produced by his staff. And he not only created paintings, he also printed the Bible for Martin Luther. He even designed cake tins and chandeliers. So that was the frog design of the days. So this combination of technology and entrepreneurial spirit is what has been driving culture, even in arts, where we wouldn't suspect it at today's perspective that much, was one of the driving forces. And it has continued until today, and what were the gears of the Industrial Revolution are actually the algorithms of the digital revolution, as we see it here. And that's not a painting, that's actually a visualization of a current AI-focused chip by Graphcore, and I think it's super beautiful. And that's something I see very often, that there are so many interesting aesthetics coming out of deep technology, like this one here, that is a big understanding of technology is something that is a crucial part of our entire society. So while we currently think, well, AI is something huge, yeah, and maybe scary, it is just a different implementation of tools, a different implementation of technology, like the stone that we've seen before. And so what I'm doing is I am combining technology, given my background, and arts, because technology currently isn't that much of a topic in arts, and I think that's a big problem because of the cultural relevance of arts. And so what I do is I use technology to create motifs that don't exist and then paint them in oils on canvas, or in this case, oil on lead. So that's a photo of the actual painting, and I'll show you a couple more. That's another one. And this is a good example. These are also photos of oil paintings of mine. And if you look at those two images, you would say that these are entirely different. And while the paintings, obviously, in their physical manifestation are entirely different, the motive is not 10 seconds away from each other. And so I'm trying to show you a little more of my process in the background and what I do to give you an understanding of how I use technology to create new aesthetics and bring technology into arts a lot more. So that's the environment that I work in to create my motives, and that's the one that you've seen before here. People used to use digital tools like a digital spray can and still work manually. I haven't even touched this type of model here when creating it. So, because the current approach is you program tools in a way that they do something for you. So what I do is I work here, that's my programming environment, and I create node-based procedural systems that then generate objects and aesthetics. So that's why it takes a software development background, because you have to figure out in an abstract way what you do and how you combine the tools, and that's just an extract, obviously, from the whole scene, how to combine these tools to actually create new aesthetics. And what you see there is actually the result of a simulation. I'll show you quickly. So what I did is I imported a 3D scan that I downloaded from the internet, and then I duplicated it, created a little tank around it, defined the physics for this tank and for these bodies, and defined how they react and interact with the walls. And then I ran the simulation, and these guys fell into the tank, collided with the walls of the tank, and then I zoomed closer in and found a state of the simulation that I liked, changed the perspective a little, and that's how I got to this aesthetics, and then I painted it in oils on canvas, as you've seen before. And so that's why these two images, as I said before, are not 10 seconds away, because that's just a different perspective out of the scene that you've seen before, with a different camera perspective, different zoom level, but it's exactly the same object. This has a surface, and this is only the wireframe. And that's what I'm trying to communicate. Oh, and by the way, I see that the animations that you see on the walls are also done by me. That's also particle system animation. And that's what I'm trying to communicate here, is that technology is such an important part of our society, and we have to integrate it into our thinking, because if we don't, we expose ourselves to threats that come upon us. Could be different cultures, different other problems, and we take ourselves out of the opportunities that technology delivers, and that's for all of us. It's not just for developers, it's for the society as a whole. And that's what I wanted to communicate, and if you want to take a look at the paintings, you'll see a lot more on my website. And the astronaut that you see around here is also one that I created, so these are photos of my paintings. If you want to take a closer look, write me, come visit me in my studio here in Munich, and I'll happy to tell you a lot more about it. Thank you very much. So open for questions. So it sounds like I covered it all. Oh, here we go. The microphone's on its way.
Mark, have you looked at generative adversarial networks, and you looked at how those might be able to create interesting new forms of art?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good point. There has been this group of people, like Obvious Art, that was the group of the name, who used an algorithm that was actually developed by someone else, a really cool guy. And what they did is they used two artificial intelligence algorithms. One took images from paintings and reassembled them, and the other algorithm looked at the results of this first algorithm and try to find out whether it's created by human or not. And the first painting that they consider to be a human painting, although it was created by the other algorithm, is what they printed onto a canvas and then sold it at a very high price. I think it was at Christie's or something. And I find that very interesting. However, I think more in terms of tools, and I still believe that man is at the center of it all and uses technology as a tool. So I find things most interesting where you get into some sort of a dialogue with technology. You are the creator, be that when you write software or when you create arts, you are at the center of it all and use technology as a tool, like the stone back in the day. So I'm very open at using different types of algorithms, like the simulation I mentioned before. But I think at the end of the day, the matter is what is the creativity of man that turns that into something interesting.
Hi, Mark. Thanks
Hey.
for this. Quick question. You said that in the last piece here, you downloaded a model from the internet, right? Is that original artist attributed in your work?
No, not really, because it was for sale. So I purchased the model, and
Okay,
it was
so there's a
in the
difference.
license that it was okay to use it. And actually, but that's a very good question. That's asked a lot of. If you combine things, what still is attributed to the original artist and what becomes part of the new artistic work. And there's a lot of freedom in arts, and it even goes as far as entire appropriation, where an artist takes a Marlboro Man photograph and takes a photo of it and sells it as their own copy. I think that I want to be at the level where I combine things in a way that it creates something new. So while I do use things, just like I use algorithms that other people programmed, some I programmed, some programmed other, it's the combination of it all to turn it into something new. So I want to create something really new and not just appropriate and copy and paste as is.
Hi, Mark. Do you see the gap as technology is evolving and getting more and more complex, also to be used by kind of everyday normal people, the gap growing between the burden as an artist to use such a technology to create art? And if so, do you think that the same way as consumer technology is getting more consumer friendly and bringing it closer, this also needs to happen for art?
Yeah. I used to have a slide in here that just shows an iPhone, and I think it's kind of a very interesting period right now because we're on the verge from very big computers like mainframes to PCs to laptops to smartphones to smart watches to IoT. So the many small things eat the few big ones, and it's about to dissolve. So technology is about to dissolve into an Alexa, into voice control. And what I thought about the photo of the iPhone was that maybe sometime we think back at the good old days where we were still able to touch technology, because we're about to kind of lose the haptics of technology. And I don't even know whether that's good or bad, but I think that is what's happening. So the world is becoming even more technological, but at an invisible level. So somewhere in the background, be that artificial intelligence, cloud computing, big data, whatever it is, it's moving into the backyard, some sort of, but controlling our lives more and more. Be that GPS navigation, Spotify playlists, Amazon recommendations, prices of our insurances. So there already is a lot of invisible control of how we live our lives. And that's also why I think it is so important to think about technology, because the central message for me is I don't want to leave it up to an institution to decide for me whether that's good or bad. I want to empower people to think about these things, because in the mass of us, so to say, there is a lot of power. And as soon as we leave it up to someone else, they will make decisions for us. Be that good or bad, I don't know. And that's something I don't feel comfortable with. I feel very comfortable with technology as long as I'm able to think about it, speak about it. I don't feel comfortable about leaving technology into the hands of someone else who decides for me how that technology is influencing or impacting my life. I think there was another question here.
So, as far as I remember, the big motivation or dream of Steve Jobs was to empower people to be more creative or to be creative with technology. I'm not sure if this dream came true, but what we're seeing is democratization of art. Many people do music and art with their computers. So is this something you support and embrace? Or would you say, no, there are clearly people who are artists, and there are clearly people who will never be artists, or something like that.
Yeah, very, very good question. I fully support this, and I try to stay away from definitions like artists and who is an artist or not, because at the end of the day, it's just in the eye of the beholder or in the eye of the audience to decide what they like and what they like to hang. And I'm also very happy if someone just takes a painting, hangs it over their sofa, and is happy about it and doesn't even think about technology. That's totally fine. I don't have a problem with decorative kind of approach to art, so I fully support this, because at the end of the day, the eye is one of the most important senses that we have, and if it's something that talks to you and makes you happy, and if someone is capable of providing anyone with something that they like and like seeing, talking about visual arts in this case, that's how good can that be? So I think at the end of the day, I like it if people are happy with their lives, with their environment, and if someone is capable of helping that, supporting that, and contributing to that, that's the best that can happen.
What other approaches do you use to create art? We saw like you use simulations, obviously, but do you also start like, let an algorithm maybe start on a blank canvas to create something?
Not directly. I am very happy to be open about using various types of technology in all situations. So from creating the motive to actually creating the paintings, and there are some paintings where I just use a brush like 500 years ago, because the brush is the best tool in this case. But there are other paintings where I use various machines, huge ones, small ones, that I reconstruct and make them compatible with oil, which is a lot of effort, because none of the machines out there like oils because of the pigment that's very abrasive. And so that is my freedom. I consider my freedom not to take a brush and then take a huge canvas and then just draw something. There are others that are very good at this and create fascinating results. My freedom is in using the technology, both in creating the motives and then in creating the paintings, to create something new where I leave traces, technology leaves its traces, but at the end of the day, it's still something aesthetical that represents our current time. So I'm trying to visualize or materialize the digital era, because, as I mentioned before, it is so much about to dissolve. And that's what I like about oils and canvas. You can touch it, you can hang it over to a wall, and you don't need a cable, although I do these light installations. But I find it so very fascinating to look at an oil painting. That's, for me, that's the most stimulating experience of looking at something visual object.
So you're using technology to create art. How do you feel about technology creating art? So there might be programs or something in terms of artificial intelligence, who, like machines, might be able to create a Mona Lisa or something like that. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think machines or technology in general is very good at doing certain things. Like technology is machines, for example, or software or algorithms are very good at doing very specific things very quickly and in vast amounts. So that's where technology is really good. So like, it's, for example, to render the simulation that I just saw. I don't see much contribution that I can provide to manually calculate the simulation. So that's why I left it up to technology, because it makes sense. On the other hand, technology per se does not have creativity. I fully believe in this, because at the end of the day, if a technology, be that a machine or a software, creates something, it's always the result of someone who programs or controls it. So that's why I put man into the center of the creational process. Even an algorithm that does something very abstract is just the result of people who wrote this algorithm and people who decided which training set to use to train this algorithm. So it's always decisions made by humans that influence what these machines create. And something, because you asked for it specifically, like a machine creating a new Mona Lisa, to me that's a little too backwards, because the Mona Lisa is there, like it or not, but it is there, and that's an aesthetic that has been there for a long period of time. And I'm trying to find out how to use technology to create something new as a tool, to just use it as a tool. And let's not forget, even the brush of a painter was an innovative tool back in the days when they initially used grass to paint, or their fingers. So a brush is just another tool, but that's not the only one. And that's what I'm trying to create the art around, the freedom of using the tools that are there today. And that's what creates contemporary art in this case. All right, so I think we're about to wrap up and head on to the next one. Thank you very much for your patience.